We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Representative Adam Schiff achieved something that very few human beings have achieved on this earth, and that is to become a 100% ratio on the pages of Twitter. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, or even what Mr. Schiff did to deserve this rather dubious honor, we're joined by host of the Uprising podcast, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, general man about town, and possessor of the proud Twitter handle at Uprising Podcast on Twitter, Scott DeCosenza. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Who hasn't been ratioed yet, I believe. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Let's no, not yet, but the day's still early. The
thing about being ratioed is you have to have a lot of attention. So in the game of social media, you have to start by winning before you can lose big through a ratio, right?
So a ratio, for our listeners who aren't familiar with this, it's when you tweet something and the responses are more negative than positive. So this people say he got ratioed if there were more negative responses than positive. In the case of Mr. Schiff's latest tweet, May 31st tweet, it was actually 100% negative responses. So it's a very rare honor or dishonor indeed. Now, this is why I actually want to speak to Scott Cosenza about this, because there's actually a First Amendment free speech element that I believe Mr. Schiff completely ignored in his tweet. Now, I'll just read this to you, Scott. He says, "I am deeply distressed by the burning of the pride flag at a San Fernando Valley elementary school. Every child deserves safety and acceptance. We must fight against discrimination and create an inclusive environment for all. Hate has no place in our schools and communities." End quote. So a couple of things to unpack there, Scott. What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, there is a free speech implication with burning a flag, to be sure. I think the key focus there, actually, in terms of law enforcement resources and how that might play out, is if the burning of any flag is used as an effort to intimidate someone illegally, then that act is illegal. If the burning of a flag is used to express speech, like to say these ideas or
speech
set of
here,
ideas,
we also mean opinion and personal feeling, right?
We are talking about the expression of ideas. That's exactly right. That is what speech means within the context of our First Amendment guarantees for free speech. And the Supreme Court has ruled in the case of the burning of the American flag, for instance, that they can't criminalize that activity because of its expressive nature, that people are doing it to express themselves, and that expression is covered under the First Amendment. Presumably, the burning of a pride flag would be covered by the same protections. Again, that's if the burning is designed to express a message and not for the purpose of intimidating. If there's like one trans kid at the school and they burn the flag on that person's lawn, that's not about the free speech necessarily, right? That's about something else.
Okay, so from what it seems here is, let's ignore that for some reason they have a range of flags at an elementary school. But he's saying that hate has no place in our communities. And Adam Schiff is referring to the hate as the burning of the flag, right? So that he's referring to the hate as an expression of a First Amendment right is hateful and has no place in our communities. I happen to know that many prominent Democrats have never said that burning the American flag is tantamount to hate and has no place in our communities. So where does the juxtaposition come in on this, Scott?
How dare you, Mark, to try to apply consistency and to punish hypocrisy in our elected officials? You'll be left without anybody. You'll be left without anybody to represent the American people in our halls of power.
I'll just make a Mark Angelides Liberty Nation Radio flag and let people burn it in an expression of their opinion, right? That's okay.
Yeah, one guesses that, especially with respect to the tweeter in question, Mr. Schiff, who has evidenced a remarkable capacity for thinking one thing when facts are on one side of the issue and then another thing when they're on the other side of the issue.
I believe you're referring to the irrefutable proof that he claims to have seen regarding Russian collusion.
He's not going to let your fetish for consistency and clear thinking color his opinion on this matter, I think.
Okay, so what we're putting this down to, this epic historical ratioing of Mr. Adam Schiff is basically people just didn't enjoy the hypocrisy of it. But Twitter itself, it's quite the battleground now, isn't it, for both the expression of opinion and for the rehabilitation of certain characters, isn't it, Scott? And I think you know what I'm talking about here.
Let me know explicitly. What are you talking about?
Miss Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yes. Excuse me. It is. Well, it is a great place for that. So if you are, Kamala Harris has been, whether you agree that it's an accurate assessment or not, she's been assessed by many as being a person who lacks the ability to speak clearly and extemporaneously in a way that befits national leadership, I think is the charitable way to say it.
Although I must interrupt, one of the View hosts, I don't know which one's name because they all seem quite interchangeable to me, mentioned that, well, she repeats the same thing again because she's a lawyer.
Well, the manner in which she does so, I think, maybe is indicative of her.
She's a lawyer in the second grade.
Her legal career, I'll just stop there before I get into some more trouble. But if you look at the official VP Twitter feed and her Twitter feed, you can basically see, well, this is where the points that they think they need to work on, that they're responding to by presenting her as the opposite of somebody who has trouble with words. So we'll see if that bears out when it comes time for people to cast their ballots.
All right, let's swing back to the free speech issue here. Now, obviously, Elon Musk, when he took over, he made some claims that he was a free speech absolutionist, I think were his exact words. And I know that for you and I, who both appreciate the value of free speech, that those were quite heady words to hear from somebody who's going to be controlling essentially the public town square, as it were.
Free speech absolutist. That's right.
Yeah. Now, do you think he's lived up to that promise?
Well, I don't think he ever said that Twitter would equal a total, free speech zone.
He said that up to and including the law.
Right. But there are certain things that he's shown a willingness to restrict speech in certain areas, especially with parody accounts. For instance, he's clamped down on that quite a bit. And so it's not the equal to the free speech protections we have guaranteed by the Constitution. However, I still think that Elon is the beacon of light and hope for public expression on these mega platforms. And mega platforms is where so many of us choose to engage other people. We're not by and large on alternatives to these platforms. When you look at the numbers, people favor these huge platforms. So to the extent that we have a huge platform, one of the most successful, and that the proprietor of that platform is committed to allowing different voices to speak, I think that that is all to the plus and to the good. And I celebrate the man's actions to make that happen. It was no small thing to buy Twitter, take it private, and dial back the massive censorship that the progressives, who worked at Twitter, were able to achieve for voices against those, ideas they didn't like.
And you can check out Scott D. Cosenza's ideas and his productions of the Uprising podcast at Podcast Uprising on Twitter, or check it out on libertynation.com or anywhere where good podcasts are provided. Scott, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
And you're listening to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. Now, after this short break, we're going to be back with Brent Bozell, founder and president of the Media Research Center. The MRC has carried out an in-depth study into the Department of Homeland Security's grantee program, which apparently targets conservatives and Christians across the country. It's going to be quite the show, quite the interview, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five, produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5 is the left-free zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's
Hi, I'm
Lisa
Lisa
K.
K.
Donner,
Donner,
joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.